Welcome back to another book review. So this one is called No Longer Human. I just recorded a version of this review. I gave it one rating, and I wanted to change it because I actually have a more positive view than even that one. It was already a pretty positive review of the book. So when you go through this book, you'll not really like the main character, and you'll not like their choices. And at least for me, you kind of have a disdain for them because it seems like most of the book they're doing a bunch of negative things. They're justifying their behaviors. It's actually the main character is similar to the last book that I did a book review on, All My Friends Are Becoming Strangers, where the main character is someone that you don't like, but it's written in a autobiographical perspective. So once you have the context that, it's not entirely true or valid, because it's written from the perspective of the person going through the events, and that person probably embellished things, most likely did, that you kind of can look at it more in a psychological standpoint to where you can think about why they're saying different things, and the different aspects are being exaggerated or changed, or what could be different justifications, yada yada yada. And you go through the book, at least I did, and you're just like, this guy's an idiot, making dumb choice after dumb choice, and like trying to, I mean, like a normal person would in a lot of contexts, is try to push the blame or not really take ownership of their own behavior whatsoever, and then continue to make similar mistakes and double down on all these different things. So you go through that, and just at the very end, I actually liked how it was wrapped up, because you have essentially like it's like a written like a notebook. Someone's just writing their own thoughts about themselves throughout it, and then at the end, the author who collected these notebooks and got it all together and made this book kind of talked about how they gathered the notebooks and created the story and more background in general, because the notebooks are written from like an anonymous person or someone that isn't really known. That's known by the person who gave the notebook to the original author, but the original author is the one that I guess curated the story in a way. Um, so I don't know if the author who made this book, or the main author of the book, changed the story or whatever with that. Who knows with that? But at least the idea that you get is that it's like an autobiography written by the perspective of kind of a crazy person. But at the end, he's like, they knew who this person is, and he probably exaggerated, blah, 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 blah. So um, that really made it a higher rating for me. So I would actually honestly give it an 8 out of 10. And throughout the book, uh, not liking it, it was interesting because I didn't necessarily not like the book, but now it's like when my perspective was changed to, I don't like the character. I don't like any of his choices. You just dislike him the whole time. You realize like it is kind of like him trying to justify, the whole world is difficult. I'm no longer human. Blah blah blah. And it's like self-aggrandizing in a way. And you're like, it's kind of not necessarily the point of the book to not like the main character, but you kind of realize that it's kind of narcissistic in a way, but um, maybe has mental illness as well. But you at least for me, I got to think more just not just about the stuff that went on in the story, but just kind of the overarching psychology around it. So that made it a higher rating for me. Is like if it was just a story and there was no context about anything about how they got the story or how it was embellished and whatnot, definitely be a lot lower. But because it's kind of like, to me, it's like this is how a crazy person thinks. It became more interesting in that regard. Now, that's as far as rating. So this is unrelated to the actual quality of the text and the story and the writing and that. But the writing was fine. Obviously, it was translated from Japanese, so not everything is going to be as naturally flowing as if it was written by a native English speaker, but readability and all of that was fine. But my prints of the book, and granted it was a couple bucks, so I'm not spending a ton of money to get these books, but whoever printed this exact copy, like the paper and the letters, did a horrendous job. So let me show you one example that happened all the time. So by my finger there, you can see it says not office building, but it should. And anything that had a double F just wasn't in there. And I'm almost assured that it wasn't on purpose because it was very consistent throughout the book. Maybe that's some, literary strategy, but the feeling that it wasn't. And this is harder to find, but there's also letter B's, like in the word but, that would just be written as an H. So it just wasn't print. It was literally printed as an H and not a B. So you have letters that were missing, letters that were changed that shouldn't have been changed, and really a lot of so you kind of see at the bottom how it's printed really close to the bottom edge, like it just wasn't printed very well. So the actual quality and like here, so I don't know who made this copy, but I don't think it was the original publisher. I hope not anyway, because it was like the actual copy of the book. Like I would never give this to someone to read because of the quality of the actual letters, like of that. I would tell someone you should find a book to read, or you should find this to read, but this should just be thrown into the trash. It's very bizarre why it was printed because like it seems like the normal cover, and it's I don't know. It seems like it's a normal book. I've never read a book like that that's been printed. Like the actual print of the text was terrible. So that was a very weird experience to go through that and just it was consistent with anything that had a double F. So like effect, office, off, anything like that. F's were I don't think any of them were there. And then random letter B's were H's. There would just be random things that were missing like that. Thankfully, once you understood the pattern of the mistakes that they were making, it didn't make it impossible to read, but it definitely, yeah, I just don't understand how you could print a book so poorly. I don't know. But thankfully, the story was still good. I guess on the back of it, it says it's fiction. I thought it was like a semi autobiography, or I don't know. I guess maybe it is fiction with that. But even if it is, the idea of that it's like, kind of looking at a crazy person writing, how they interact with the world, and then the person's like, we found these stories and kind of shared it with that. That was a good way to tie in. It's a really short book as well. So I think that does help with the rating. I mean, if this was like 1,000 pages or like multiple books in a series and it was the character like that, then it would have been a little bit more of a sludge to get through because you don't really like the main character. He does a lot of dumb stuff. But because it's a really quick read, I do think that helps with the rating as well because you don't have to, I don't say suffer through it, but you don't have to like be annoyed at the main character for as long because he's not really someone that you want to be reading about for thousands of pages. He's not a likable or good person in a lot of ways. But I know I didn't talk too much about the plot. I don't think that's something I'm gonna spend much time doing in this review. Just wanted to give my general thoughts about it, but certainly would recommend it. It's something that is at least if you're like me, you won't like the character while you're reading it, but then once you have that context, you kind of not necessarily like the character, but you kind of can think more thoroughly about the psychology of it all. And yeah, if you do get a better copy than what I have, because that one just was the hardest part of reading it was literally missing letters and stuff. But thankfully, it was not to an extreme extent. But that's it. So another book review. I don't know what book I'm going to read next, but I guess we'll find out once I do a review of it. But that's it for this one. Talk to you all in the next one. Peace.